Hi, welcome back to Hannity. So the Walnut Pony Baseball League in California has a superstar in the making. His name, 3-year-old Lennox Salcido, who was playing over the weekend, gave the performance of a lifetime. It all started when his coach told him to run to home plate as, fast as he could. But Lennox had another idea in mind, and that's when he shifted gears, slowed it down, way down, headed for home, slow motion, the crowd's cheering as he inched his way little by little towards home plate, and he scores. Definitely a play for the highlight reel. Oh, I remember those days. Run! You're just as a parent. All right, before we go, I want to take a minute and thank all of you, our viewers, again making us the most watched show in cable news, again for the month of April, the first quarter of this year. Thank you. We'll always be fair and balanced. We're going to work hard every night. That's our promise. Let not your heart be troubled. Look who's next. Laura Ingraham. By the way, I got my football again. We're going to try it differently tonight. How are you?
I'm good. By the way, I have every DVR at my house set to Hannity. So
Thank you.
I'm hoping that I helped a little bit on your ratings. The whole team did great.
Wait,
like what am I, chopped liver? I did well, too. We all did well.
You're doing phenomenal. We're really proud of you, by the way. And Tucker's doing phenomenal.
No, we're all great. Let's not
we're all hated.
One for all.
I know, but the press, I've had so much baloney negative press lately. If I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it.
That's true. They're not going to write any articles about you.
You know what?
Good.
We don't get to do this without this audience. And
no.
You know what? Thank them all, because, frankly, this country needs this channel more than ever, in my opinion.
Well, I could not agree more, and that's enough of our talking about ourselves. Throw me the football.
Wait a minute. Have a great night.
Throw it to me.
Yeah,
got it.
Got it.
Oh, awesome. Good evening from Washington. Someone throw me a real football tomorrow night. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. The burning question in Washington tonight: who leaked that list of Mueller questions for Trump? We look at who stands to gain the most. And a wild story out of California. Oh, my gosh. Kanye West gets a very public threat, physical threat, for supporting Donald Trump. The group behind the intimidation efforts will shock you. Plus, NRA officials are also getting peppered with vile death threats. Oh, that's nice. Oh, how sweet. We debate an underreported story, why the anti-gun crowd is so prone to threaten violence. But first, corruption, collusion, cash, and the caravan. That's the focus of tonight's angle. You've seen these photos. Well, the current situation at our southern border is completely out of hand. That caravan of Central American migrants that started at 1,000 strong is now down to about 200 people or so. And many of them are camped out at just a stone's throw from the U.S. Customs checkpoint at San Ysidro. Now, as we've been reporting, the aliens are being coached, in some cases, by American lawyers traveling to the caravan and telling them how to qualify for asylum. Now, this undoubtedly infuriates many of you who would also love free legal advice. Wouldn't that be nice? The president, as well, is totally fed up. He tweeted this week that the migrant caravan that is openly defying our border shows how weak and ineffective U.S. immigration laws are, I'll say. Well, yesterday, U.S. Customs officials allowed 8 members of the caravan into the country to process their asylum claims. Today, another 17 were allowed in. The acting director of Immigration Customs Enforcement, Tom Homan, he described the situation on Fox and Friends this morning.
I think it's an attack on the sovereignty of this nation. Look, do I think some of these people have a credible fear case? Do some of these folks, are they escaping fear and persecution? Yes, some are. But I also know that many aren't. Many are taking advantage of a system with loopholes in it.
Well, he's absolutely right. Many of these people are being taught to game the system. But what are the forces fueling the migrant rush to the borders? Let's start with the facts. It's really important that we all understand what's really playing out here. This mini surge of humanity, 200 or so, it's playing out on our television screens every day. It's just a drop in the bucket compared to the massive influx of entire U.S. family units and unaccompanied minors who crossed the southwest border between October 2017 and March of this year. Look at those numbers. Now, the number of migrants also from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, those numbers have climbed significantly in recent years, even as Mexican migration has climbed. So Mexico's going down, and that part of the continent's going up. Now, immigrants, both legal and illegal, originally from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, often called the Northern Triangle, that rose by 25% from 2007 to 2015. Again, even as the figure dropped by 6% for Mexican immigrants. Now, of the 3 million Northern Triangle immigrants living here as of 2015, a whopping 55% were illegal, according to the Pew Research Center. Now, by comparison, only 24% of all other immigrants in the United States were unauthorized. So more than double the figure for the Northern Triangle countries. Now, there are many facilitators, many supporters, and many magnets for this migration scheme, both inside and outside America. Now, here at home, the forces are powerful to encourage this crush at the border. The Chamber of Commerce, they want more workers, agricultural interests, obvious reasons. Sanctuary cities and states, they see future voters and maybe even taxpayers. Well, MS-13 and other gangs looking for new recruits. Human traffickers, they love the situation at the border. And, of course, the drug cartels. But political interests in Central America are also driving the poorest of the poor northward. These governments want the poor, and, of course, their criminals, to leave the country. Now, it seems counterintuitive for we as Americans. A country wanting its own people to leave, huh? Doesn't make any sense. Well, meet the Honduran ambassador to Mexico, Alden Rivera Montes. He marched with the caravan, I kid you not. He went and marched with the caravan in mid-April. And here's what he told El Universal about his participation. He said, I've been ordered by my government to support the Honduran migrants traveling with the caravan. There are about 200 Hondurans who we will help out with paperwork and whatever is necessary. Now, wait a second. Ordered by his government to do whatever is necessary? Now, while one might expect that the constant drain, right, from the populations of the Northern Triangle would debilitate their economies, you think you have a drain of people. Well, that's not the case. In fact, the money called remittances sent by migrant laborers from the United States back to Guatemala, back to Honduras, and back to El Salvador is massive and growing. Now, look at remittances going from the U.S. to Guatemala alone. In 2009, Guatemalans here in the United States sent nearly $4 billion back home. This past year reached $8.192 billion, that figure, so double. And they are up 4% in the first quarter of this year, so it's up, up, up. In Honduras, remittances are up to more than, as well, $4 billion a year. They've actually risen 18% the first month of 2018. This makes them up nearly 17%. Listen to this. This is 17% of the GDP of Honduras. So the remittances, just so you understand, are 17% of the economy of the whole country of Honduras. No wonder what they want them to keep coming. For El Salvador, it's nearly 16% of their GDP. So the remittances are a huge economic boon to these poor countries. So why would any third world nation focus on solving problems at home when it's so much easier to export their neediest to the United States and at the same time for those poor countries to benefit from their remittances when they send the money back home? Look, this is just madness. And there are some definitive steps that we can take in the meantime to remove these incentives. Now, why should illegal immigrants living in the United States be able to send cash home to families with zero government tax from the United States government? Now, why not slap a 25% levy on each remittance that leaves America? That wall, ooh, and a lot more could be funded really fast. Ditto for foreign aid. Well, what am I talking about? Well, in 2017, we sent Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras a combined total of $587 million in foreign aid. Oh, until especially the Northern Triangle countries get their acts together, root out their own corruption, start improving the lives of their own people, we should consider at least withholding some, and some people are saying all, foreign aid. Sounds harsh, but something's got to change here, folks. This border-busting and asylum fraud is an insult to every American taxpayer, every legal immigrant, our rule of law, and as Tom Homan said on Fox and Friends, our sovereignty. And it is time for us to stop subsidizing the lawlessness. If you ask me, it's the American people who need asylum these days, asylum from the politicians who got us into this mess in the first place, and those in Congress over on Capitol Hill who refuse to do what's necessary to secure the homeland. And that's the angle. Joining us now with reaction is Anastasia Tonello from the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Anastasia, I'm sure you disagree with a lot of what I said there, and I'll just let you comment.
Well, as I explained earlier, a lot of the comments are on the political climate, on economics. I'll limit my comments to the immigration laws, and happy to discuss the policies and how those are being...
Okay, so you're telling us what you won't talk about, but let's talk about why there has been, and I think we have a graphic to illustrate this, a tenfold increase in the claims for asylum coming out of these Northern Triangle countries, especially Honduras. Asylum requests increased tenfold between 2009 and 2016. Why do you think that is?
Again, I mean, there are issues in those countries. There's a lot of political unrest. There have been, just traditionally, there were, as a result of deportations, a lot of the prisoners that were in gangs in LA and were deported have taken advantage of political chaos in those countries and were able to take advantage of systems, which leads to violence. We see a lot of these asylum seekers are women, they are children. So
a lot of them aren't. I mean, a lot of them are women and children, and they're obviously incredibly sympathetic, and we want nothing but good things to happen to all people who want a better life for their families. But the question is, under our current law, and you're an expert as an immigration lawyer. I actually did one immigration case when I was a defense attorney, believe it or not. But the asylum laws require a credible fear of persecution. Yet, in the surveys that have been done of these migrants in transit or when they're being deported back home, they overwhelmingly state that their concern is an economic one. And you can't blame them. You know, it's hard to make a life in Guatemala or El Salvador. I've spent a lot of time in both countries, and they're beautiful countries with rotten governments. But right now, we have a situation where we have hundreds of thousands of cases backlogged in our immigration courts, and frankly, we're all out of personnel, and we're all out of money as far as processing this. So how would you balance those concerns of the United States with our own homeless problem, our own veterans on the streets problems, our opioid crisis, the schools are being overcrowded, with the desires of foreigners to come here for a better life?
I mean, I think earlier you were talking about the corruption in Honduras and these demands put on these officials. And I think that what's incredibly important in all of this is the rule of law, is due process. Where America, the Constitution is very strong. We have very clear guidance and rules on what we expect to give as far as legal process and procedure. So that is something that I don't think we should compromise on, and I don't think we should pick and choose who gets due process. It's a fundamental part of our Constitution.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a fundamental concern for Americans that we have borders that are actually enforced and laws that are not gamed by attorneys who go down to Mexico or go down to Central America and literally coach people as to how to make their case and make their claim. It goes from representation to advocacy for policy change or advocacy for entrance into the United States, despite the fact that a lot of these lawyers don't know much of anything about the background of these migrants. I want to play a soundbite for you from our Homeland Security Secretary about who else is trying to gain access to America. Let's watch.
Border security is national security. And what we see at the Department of Homeland Security, we see 15 terrorists either planning to travel or actually traveling to the United States each day, known as suspected terrorists. So that means they're coming through our legal land, port, and air.
Are you concerned about that, that in these caravans, I mean, again, that's a drop in the bucket compared to the thousands upon thousands of people who have been processed into our country since last October, but it's the visual image, I think, that gets a lot of people. But are you concerned that in the mix of people both crossing illegally and presenting themselves to border officials, that terrorists will take advantage of this mass of humanity?
I believe that we should have borders, that applications should be processed, that people should have their cases reviewed when they are presenting themselves for entry to the United States. But I also believe in smart borders. I believe that a lot of this information is intelligence-based, that we have access to information on who's traveling and how they're coming in. And so I think that...
Well, it takes only one person, though, right, Anastasia? It takes one person to gain access to our country, and we already know about all the stories of, now Somalis. Some Somalis have tried to, I guess, gain access to the caravan, maybe exploit people within the caravan, which is also heartbreaking. And so we know they gamed the system. They gamed it on 9/11. They gamed it before, trying to come into our country in planes with shoes that explode. And if it's a porous border with crushes of people coming at one time, that's a logical place for them to enter. And I know you're not a policymaker, but when we have lawyers rushing down to Mexico to make the case for asylum for people, again, that, you can't check the background on most of these people. Most of these people are, they're poor people with, what are you going to go to, like the local town hall in Honduras and do a background check on every client? You're not going to be able to do that, are you?
But there are background checks, and we do have very smart intelligence capabilities. So if there are people on watch lists, if there's people that we're concerned about...
Yeah, not everyone's on a watch list. Yeah, well, not everyone's on a watch list, but I understand your point. And look, lawyers are there to argue the case for their clients, and these happen to be pro bono clients for all these migrants that are trying to cross the border. Anastasia, we really appreciate your coming on to explain your case and your perspective here. A lot of the lawyers down in Mexico are, frankly, not interested in coming on to explain themselves, and you really advanced it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And America has a proud history, by the way, of granting asylum to refugees, but the wording of the law is so vague it is susceptible to abuse. Under Title 8 of the Federal Code, a person is eligible for asylum if, quote, he or she has suffered past persecution or because he or she has a well-founded fear of future persecution, and the definition of persecution seems wide open to interpretation. Here to help us understand the administration's asylum policy with this new development with the caravan is the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration, Francis Cisna. Francis, good to have you on. This is really infuriating to a lot of Americans, I have to say. They're very compassionate, very caring people, very generous. They donate to their churches and to organizations that help people in their home countries. But this is a protest that happens every year, and it's meant to tug at the heartstrings of Americans and force the U.S. government to open its doors, regardless of the merit of these claims.
I think you're right. I think what this is, the caravan represents, is a organized, intentional, and I would even say cynical attempt to tax and exploit an overburdened immigration system by people who know the inadequacies of the system and who, as Vice President Pence said yesterday, are treating these people who are already victims in their own country, many of them are, victimizing them again by turning them into puppets of their cause.
And you see the NGOs that are rushing in there. You see reporters embedded for weeks, almost marching with them. You see the Honduran ambassador to Mexico marching with the migrants, saying, my government ordered me to be here to facilitate their paperwork. What?
I know. It's,
and this administration should get on the phone, and I'm sure the president is, I'm not saying what to do, but hey, El Presidente, let's talk, because this is not tenable. It's not good for your country either, believe it or not, to have your people fleeing.
No, I think the other victim in this whole situation is the immigration system itself. The system, which was created back in the 1990s to handle these types of cases at the border, was never intended to handle a surge of people like this with prepared claims, packaged claims. The system was intended to work expeditiously and quickly, and with this type of action, that's not going to work.
Why is it, do you think, and look, you do this every day, we've had a 41% increase in the unaccompanied minors between February and March of this year, and a 49% increase of entire what's called family units crossing the border. And if you compare it to March of 2017, Trump first comes in, people are like, whoa, I'm not going to try to cross the border. The increase is 203% overall for people crushing across the border. Why is that?
I think one of the reasons surely is that people have figured out how to game the system. There are ways to do it. People know how to do it. If you're going to come here and claim asylum, people know that the first step is to demonstrate a credible fear that you're being persecuted in your home country. And the standard is intentionally low. Congress made it low on purpose. People know that. They know that all you have to do is express a story, tell a story.
A story, and how do you verify the story?
Well, the
witnesses, call witnesses,
no, at the credible
fly
fear,
them in from Honduras.
At the credible fear stage, all you have to show is a story that qualifies you for asylum and is done credibly.
Unbelievable. Thank you for the insights, and we're going to have you back. And by the way, was it the special counsel's office or a member of the Trump team that leaked that big list of questions for the president? Two top legal minds weigh in next. If we want to know who leaked the special counsel's long list of questions for the president, we need to ask, who stands to most to gain? Well, a former assistant to Bob Mueller blamed President Trump for the leak, but Trump blasted the leak himself in a tweet earlier today. A report in the Washington Post tonight, though, suggests that the leaked list may be a series of questions compiled by Trump attorney Jay Sekulow. It may have actually been a list of questions that the president's legal team believed Trump would be asked, kind of a moot court situation. Let's ask two top legal minds why they think the list was leaked. Former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DeGeneva, and former Whitewater Deputy Independent Counsel, Saul Weisenberg. Joe, let's start with you. I mean, the intrigue about who leaked what and who has motive. I mean, it's like Columbo here, Joe. But
I actually don't care who leaked it.
Yeah.
I think what's important is that these are clearly the types of questions that have been discussed between the president's team and Mr. Mueller. And the question is, what do these questions say? They say that the investigation is now lurching into territory protected by the constitutional privileges of the President of the United States, and that if Mueller, let's assume these questions are accurate, that this is what Mueller wants to ask. If they are, and if he insists on answers and will not accept written answers and demands an interview, which the President rejects, and then Mueller insists on a subpoena, we are headed to a constitutional crisis because the president's not going to answer these questions under any set of circumstances.
Saul, when I saw tonight this report in the Washington Post about the presidential subpoena, you know, it takes kind of a lot to shock me these days in Washington, but I took a couple of extra breaths there. Your reaction?
I'm not sure I saw the Post thing. Is there a presidential? Is the subpoena already issued to the president?
No, it's just apparently Mueller raised the possibility with the Trump legal team, reportedly.
Well, I think Joe is absolutely right. If President Trump decides not to sit in for an interview and answer these questions, and these are very broad questions that definitely raise issues of both executive privilege and separation of powers, if he declines to answer and Mueller issues a subpoena, you know, it's not just a question of does Trump invoke the Fifth Amendment or go to the grand jury. He's going to go and litigate this issue. And here's something that is very interesting that I don't believe anybody has talked about. Remember, in the Watergate years, you had U.S. versus Nixon, where the Supreme Court rejected President Nixon's blanket claims of executive privilege. But in that decision, they pointed out that Leon Jaworski, the special counsel, had been explicitly granted the power to contest executive privilege. I'm not sure Bob Mueller has the power under his appointment from Rod Rosenstein or under the regulation to go in and even challenge executive privilege. So there's a possible third way for the president to bottle this up in court on the executive privilege issue.
Oh, I love that. Joe, that's fascinating. Any particular questions in this lengthy list jumped out at you, and why?
Yes, the questions putatively posed by Mueller about what were you thinking when you fired Comey? What were you thinking when you fired Flynn? The notion that a special counsel can intrude on the thinking process of a sitting president while he was president, firing a person that you have ultimate authority, unfettered, unreviewable authority to fire under the Constitution, tells me one thing about Mueller. He has gone goofy. The question should not be answered under any set of circumstances, and I tell you something, I would litigate this to a fare thee well. These questions are sophomoric.
Saul, any particular questions that you have in mind that would be especially problematic for this president to answer? I mean, I wouldn't, as a lawyer, I would not recommend that he do this interview under any circumstances. I didn't think so before, and I certainly don't think so now. Maybe some written answers, like, I mean, maybe a poetry or a haiku I'd send back to Mueller. But at this point, I wouldn't be engaging with that group.
Two, I agree with you. I didn't think he should go in before. Two that, I mean, you could pick any number of them. That two that struck me as particularly outrageous or almost humorous. One, why do you continue to criticize Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe? I mean, give me a break. You need to ask that? That's rather obvious. And another one was, why did you hold, Jeff Sessions, Attorney General Sessions' resignation in abeyance, I think until May 31st, and who did you discuss it with? Again, as Joe points out, this goes into the heart of executive decision-making. But it also shows something else. These questions show a couple of things. The Mueller people are outraged and livid at the president's criticisms of them, and they have a very dangerously broad view of obstruction of justice.
Joe and Saul, I want to play for you now a soundbite from Rod Rosenstein today. He was at an event, and he was reacting to what he had heard and been reported about the Freedom Caucus potentially drawing up articles of impeachment against Rosenstein. This is what he said.
They can't even resist leaking their own drafts. I just don't have anything to say about documents like that, that nobody has the courage to put their name on, and that they leak in that way. But I can tell you, there have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted.
Joe.
Well, I think Mr. Rosenstein has just shown his ignorance of the Constitution. Congress has demanded access to documents that it's entitled to under the Constitution pursuant to its oversight function. His refusal and obstructionism to turn over those documents has led to the confrontation, which is why they are considering his impeachment. If he thinks that's extortion, I suggest that he resign from office because he's clearly a legal incompetent.
Yeah, Meadows is suggesting that basically today, Saul, that, I mean, this whole extortion,
that's ridiculous.
This extortion line, I mean, it's as the Deputy Attorney General to throw around the word extortion when you're already, under a cloud of concern at the very least because of some of the makeup of the prosecutors, what's happened with the text messages, the failure to turn over documents.
He didn't pick the prosecutors. He didn't pick the prosecutors. I mean, Rod Rosenstein
I'm talking about over the investigation, and in a prickly, it was like a Comey-esque, priggish, prickly manner to go, well, I can't believe it. I mean, it just looked undignified. It was very undignified.
What you see is a man
please don't defame Rod by comparing him to Comey. Look, you've had these fights. What is it? You think it's okay for Trump to claim executive privilege vis-a-vis Mueller, but it's not okay for Rosenstein to talk to resist Congress. That's been going on since Hector was a pup, and you know it. It's a back and forth.
I don't have any problem with. He can resist Congress, but he cannot refuse to turn over documents that Congress has a right to see. But here's the point. That use of the word extortion today was an absolute outrage on the part of a constitutional officer who is the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. That is unbecoming, and it's a fireable offense. He's not going to be fired because the president shouldn't do it.
Joe, you think everything's an outrage. Everything outrageous.
Actually, that's not true, Saul. And in fact, when the Deputy Attorney General of the United States uses the word extortion for Congress seeking documents it's entitled to under oversight, that is outrageous.
Yeah, so all I'll say is, look, the only reason they ever turned over the only reason they ever turned over the documents is because they were about to be slapped with contempt of Congress. That they had to go to that level to get the documents that they're entitled to get under their normal constitutional oversight obligation. It's their obligation.
Rod's going to get what he wanted. Rod wanted to fight. He's going to get it.
You know what? The president actually is higher up than Rod Rosenstein. It's an amazing thing in our system of government. At any time in the last 6 months, the president could have picked up the phone and told Rod Rosenstein,
we get it.
Instead of tweeting, No, not fired him. He could have said, Rod, turn that stuff over, and then Rod could have either said,
that would have worked well.
No, he's been told.
Oh, come on.
He's been told.
That's
ridiculous. President has been told he cannot communicate with the Justice Department by Don McGahn, the White House counsel.
We're out of town. We're going to run to black. We're going to run to black.
I don't care what Don McGahn does. He's obviously not helping the president.
Guys, thank you both. You're right. He would have been creamed politically and PR-wise by the press and so forth, and he was advised not to do that. And by the way, when we come back, a rapper tied to Snoop Dogg issued a blood-curdling warning for Kanye West. Stay there. Well, I had really hoped that Kanye West's outspokenness would spark a real national dialogue. You know, big country, big opinions, and one in which the African-American community would question whether reflexive allegiance to the left and the Democrats has really always served them well. Well, Kanye West in recent days has been really vocal in his support of President Trump and free thought. But some of the left, they just cannot tolerate dissent. And now Kanye is facing a very public threat to his safety from a rapper tied to Snoop Dogg.
Yo, national alert. All the Crips out there, y'all Kanye up. Better not ever see you in concert. We better not ever see you around California. Stay in Calabasas. You hear me? Because we got a Crip alert for Kanye. All the Crips out there, you see that bang on his up.
Well, that's the work of L.A. rapper Daz Dillinger calling on the notorious Crips gang to bang on Kanye, meaning shoot him. Let's discuss with attorney Michael Starr Hopkins, a contributor to The Hill and radio talk show host and Fox News contributor, Kevin Jackson. All right, gentlemen, this is wild. We're going to get into what happened on TMZ today as well, which is was incredible to watch. But let's start on this physical threat. Now we have a situation, Michael, where when you disagree, you are so low on the totem pole, if you can even say that anymore, maybe you can't, but you're so low because you have the wrong views that you must be not just ridiculed on social media or, you know, any of that, but you must be destroyed, not just rhetorically, but apparently physically.
Yeah, I mean, there's no place for violence in the political discussion. I don't care whether, you know, you're Kanye West or any other celebrity or average American. I don't think the Crips or the Bloods represent the left, just like I don't think white nationalists or neo-Nazis represent the right. And I think what we should be focusing on here is what role Republicans are going to play in the African-American community. You know, Tim Scott, Colin Powell, those are both black Republicans who on policy I disagree with, but, you know, I think that they have a right to believe whatever they want to believe. Kanye West is playing a different game.
Kevin, look, Kanye West is someone who, you know, trashed George W. Bush. He didn't care about black people. He's an interesting guy on a lot of fronts. But this was kind of surprising to a lot of people when he comes out. He has this big rollout of a couple new tracks, and he has, I guess, a new album coming out soon. And I mean, is this just opportunism on his part, or does he just really like Trump and And this is
Yeah, I
kind
think
of
so.
cool for him, a cool moment.
Yeah, he's all over the political spectrum. He's already proven that he's been, anti-Bush. He happens to like Donald Trump. And the problem with what Michael said, and I believe Michael's being sincere, but the problem that people on his side of the aisle don't face is that black conservatives get ridiculed all the time. You have to have skin that's thicker than a rhinoceros and a pear the size of Alaska if you're going to be a black conservative, and Kanye's about to find this out. Rarely do you ever hear the other side. I've never heard it, but I'm going to use rarely so I don't speak in absolutes. Have I ever heard somebody come to the defense of people like myself who want nothing but the best for blacks, but get called Uncle Toms, coon butt Negroes, and I clean that up for you, Step and Fetch It, and a whole host of other names.
Those are the nice names you've been called.
Those are the nice names.
Yeah.
I've seen
the tweets. Yeah, I've seen the tweets. Now, guys, I want to play for you an exchange that happened on TMZ today, where a staffer at TMZ, we'll start with him, made a comment about Kanye as he was leaving his interview. Let's watch.
While you are making music and being an artist and living the life that you've earned by being a genius, the rest of us in society have to deal with these threats to our lives. We have to deal with the marginalization that has come from the 400 years of slavery that you said for our people was a choice. Frankly, I'm disappointed. I'm appalled.
Well, your reaction, Michael. I mean, we're going to play what Kanye actually said. But
yeah, I was going to say, I feel like...
Yeah, let's play it now. Let's play it now so people get...
Okay.
We kind of did this in reverse order, but let's play it now.
When you hear about slavery for 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all? It's like we're mentally in prison. I like the word prison because slavery goes too direct to the idea of blacks. Prison is something that unites us as one race, blacks and whites being one race. That we're the human race.
Now, Michael, do you actually think he's been slaughtered on social media, Kanye, for the last several hours? Slaughtered. But do you actually think he meant, in this kind of casual conversation on TMZ, that the horrific act of slavery was a choice that people were making? Do you think that's what he actually was trying to convey? Honestly.
I got to be honest, I don't know what Kanye meant to convey in that, but the words that he said, the fact that he would say that slavery was a choice in such a flippant way, I think that's the problem that Kevin's talking about when he talks about African Americans being criticized as conservatives. Because when Kanye does things like that, he makes it harder for then African Americans to talk about conservatism, because Kanye's playing everyone. And by using language like that, it not only inflames, but I mean, African Americans jumped off of slave ships so that they didn't have to be slaves. They ran away. They were lynched. Millions of Americans were murdered under the banner of slavery.
Horrific. And Kevin, do you think that's what Kanye West was trying?
No.
I think I know what he was saying. I think he was saying people get imprisoned in the past and they let that define themselves.
Exactly.
I think. I have no idea.
But
I imagine that's what he was trying to say.
Well, here's
40
the thing.
years ago.
It's tough to say what exactly he meant because, to Michael's point, you don't know what's in Kanye's head. However, I do believe that what Kanye is saying is that there came a point where there was a choice. For example, once we got out of slavery during Reconstruction, there were many blacks who did want to stay in that environment because they had been conditioned for that. I would say to you today, we have more blacks enslaved than we ever had in the 1860s.
But you see that's right there, using that kind of language, saying blacks are enslaved.
Michael, don't
they're not enslaved.
No.
But as a black man, you don't get to say.
I don't really care what you think about what I say. What I'm telling you is.
Then care about what your father, what your grandfather, the people who got you here said.
Try to do one at a time, guys. Go ahead.
What I care about is that today we have young blacks who are taught that slavery is such a bad thing. It's for things that they haven't been through.
It is a bad thing.
Let me finish, Michael. They've been taught that the lack of civil rights. By the way, all things done by the party that Michael supports and votes for are such bad things.
Come on, dude.
When in fact,
now you're just being full of crap. Because you know that the Republicans and Democrats flipped.
The Republicans and Democrats don't talk to me about
Lincoln was a Republican under a different banner.
Lincoln here, guys. We're not going to solve Lincoln. You got to wrap it up in like 10 seconds, Kevin.
Let me just say this. The issue is we got to get out of this mentality that everything in America is anti-black, relating back to something that's 150 years old. It's ridiculous.
All right.
Loving versus Virginia was in my parents' lifetime. My grandparents were the first integrated class. That's not a long time
What
ago.
about you,
so
Michael?
don't pretend.
What about the people of today? Are they still?
I was the
going through
only
that?
black kid in my AP classes. I've been pulled over multiple times. We all have stories.
Blacks, Michael? Was it because they didn't allow blacks?
Well, guys,
you know, drink whatever Kool-Aid you want, champ.
All right, guys,
Yeah.
we have to have a conversation, an honest conversation, and try to be as civil as possible and allow each other to make their points. I think you both made your points tonight, and we're going to continue on this. This is, I mean, it's really important, and you guys both have a really powerful voice, and we appreciate you both coming on.
Thanks so much.
And why are gun control advocates, this is another issue, so willing to use the threat of violence? Is that really happening? Well, we'll debate it next. A young woman in Florida wants to join the NRA's lawsuit against a new state law banning the sale of guns to anyone under the age of 21. But she's so afraid for her safety that she's asked a federal court to keep her identity secret. Backing that woman in court filings, the NRA cited their top Florida lobbyist, Marion Hammer. The 79-year-old great-grandmother says she's received scores of vile and vulgar phone calls, including death threats. This on the heels of NRA spokeswoman Dana Lash and Washington NRA lobbyist Chris Cox saying that they and their families have been harassed at their homes. Let's debate these tactics with radio talk show host Chris Hahn, a former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, and Grant Stinchfield, who is the host of Stinchfield on NRA TV. Gentlemen, it's great to see you. Grant, let's start with you. I know you're familiar with some of these tactics. And look, I have to say, both sides on this issue can be really bad on social. I mean, social media has devolved into the worst. I mean, people take things the wrong way, or people say things they never say in person. So both sides do these things. It is ironic, however, that the group that claims to be for love, peace, and harmony does seem to inspire some of the vilest of the threats, and you've experienced them yourself.
You know, I have, Laura. I get death threats almost on a daily basis. I believe most of them are keyboard cowards, and I don't put much stock in it. But it only takes one nut job, and certainly you see what happens to leadership at the NRA, but it's not just leadership there and people I work with. These are conservatives. Anybody that has a loud voice in this nation is being targeted, and I believe they're being targeted because the left has no other message out there. They don't have vision, they don't have policy, so what do? They turn to violence, and they take it to people to silence their voices. Look, Laura, they call us child murderers, they call us terrorists. What are they doing that for? To dehumanize it and then somehow make it okay for supporters to come out and threaten us. I promise you, it is not going to work. Yeah. Threats won't work. We're going to keep with the voice and be strong.
Chris, I'm for more speech, not less speech. I want you to respond, but I just think we need more speech. I don't like limiting people's speech. I don't like taking out recriminations against people because they disagree. I think a robust exchange of ideas is great in our country, and we should encourage it. I do believe there is, and especially on these, what, a 79-year-old great-grandmother. I mean, I'm going to read some of the things that are written about her. It is, I mean, it's the lowest of the low. I think we all agree on that. But Chris, go ahead. You were shaking your head when.
Yeah, look, I agree 100% that, you know, the First Amendment is important and free speech is important, especially political speech, which we have learned is the highest form of protected speech in this country. Where I disagree with my fellow panelist here is when he says it's the left doing this. People who make these kinds of threats are crazy, whether they are on the right wing crazy or on the left wing crazy. They are not part of any mainstream movement. They are not part of any political party or any real ideology. They are mentally disturbed, and of course many of them are keyboard cowards. I get horrible things said to me all the time. We talked about this last week, Laura, but that doesn't stop me from talking. It shouldn't stop Marion Hammer from talking, even though I disagree with much of what she stands for. And it should have stopped her from going to that hearing. I understand that she didn't go to a hearing on a bill because of some of these threats, and I think that might have also had something to do with the fact that that bill that she, you know.
I got it. But
it is what it is.
Right. But my question is, why do we hear such, precious little in the American media about those types of threats against individuals who are real strong advocates of the Second Amendment? And again, I say one of the let me just read some of these so people understand what I'm talking about. A lot of people aren't on social media. This is a tweet, April 22nd. It's not very Christian of me to say this, but I hope Marianne Hammer falls down a flight of stairs and breaks a hip. It would be good for humanity. I can't wait till the day I flip on the news and see you mourning a gunshot victim. You're disgusting and exactly what's wrong with people today. I seriously hope karma comes around for you soon. Grant, you know, I get this kind of stuff pretty much on a daily basis as well. Unless it's, you know, unless it's about children or the elderly, I think a lot of this can be discounted. But the media really, they don't report on this stuff fairly. They really don't. It's always a one-sided deal.
If I called the police every time I had a death threat leveled against me, the cops would be at my house almost every day. The problem is these are all great stories to talk about. The real problem is the left's violence. The left has shown, I mean, you look at Trump's inauguration, you look at people getting beat up for wearing a Trump hat, you look at Women's March organizers calling for jihad on the White House.
You are absolutely, look, you're wrong here.
How am I wrong?
It is not a particular ideology.
Calls for jihad on the White House.
Sir, excuse me, sir. Okay, you are wrong. It's not a particular ideology. It is crazy people. Anybody who engages in that behavior should not be assigned an ideology.
Going back to the
they
free
should be
speech
assigned the label crazy and nothing else.
Let's go back to the free speech issue. We'll end with that, guys, and we're out of time. But I will say what we've seen at Berkeley, what we've seen at colleges in shutting down speech has been violent, and it's been overwhelmingly on the left. More speech is better.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember the Tea Party in 2010, but they shut down a lot of free speech.
Stay right there. A lot to get to. We're doing a lot of defending of the First Amendment these days, but this is the latest official installment of our series, Defending the First, where we expose the enemies of the First Amendment: free speech, free thought. And tonight we talked to former Syracuse professor Stuart Card, who says he was fired for defending free speech on campus. Card says he was fired after he privately disagreed with the school's expulsion of students for their crude skits at a fraternity roast. Let's find out exactly what happened from the professor himself. Stuart Card, welcome to The Angle. Professor, look, my producer watched the video, the fraternity video. I guess it was an internal video. It wasn't posted on social media. And it was gross. I mean, it was, I don't know why people make these videos. It was gross and it was profane and so forth. They say it was a satire, actually ridiculing a conservative who apparently was, you know, a bad person, even racist and so forth. You wrote a statement, an email to the administration, and you said the following: I strongly believe that reinforcing the current myth that individuals